Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into what is literally a massive pivot point in the Lindsay Clancy trial. Day 14 of these proceedings represents a complete shift in the courtroom's atmosphere. We start with the cold, hard data of the prosecution's final witness, and we end with intensely emotional, deeply personal testimony from the defense. It's a day of profound contrasts.
Okay, let's look at our roadmap for today. We're going to cover 1. The digital footprint, 2. A motion to drop the charges, 3. A coworker's perspective, 4. The family detailing her decline, and 5. The medical expert.
Section 1. The digital footprint. The prosecution's final tech evidence.
So the prosecution brought in digital forensic examiner Ian Whiffen. His goal? Analyzing Lindsay's Apple Health data to build a super precise timeline of that tragic day, January 24th, 2023. And we're talking micro-level tracking here. In just a single hour between 10 and 11 a.m., her devices tracked her exact physical movements. Her max heart rate hit 108, she traveled roughly 759 meters, and she logged 5 total flights of stairs climbed. They're using this data to reconstruct her every single step. But here's where it gets interesting. Defense attorney Kevin Reddington stepped up and challenged how foolproof this data actually is. He pointed out a pretty glaring anomaly. 2 flights of stairs were logged at the exact same unrealistic second. Like, physically impossible, right? Reddington even used the expert's own past research against him, a blog post where Whiffen tested Apple Health accuracy on a rugby field. He argued that, sure, the tech is good, but when you combine watch and phone data simultaneously, it isn't completely infallible.
Now, what's really revealing is the digital search history pulled from her iPhone weeks earlier on January 12th. This paints a picture of a frantic, desperate search for answers. During the day, she was looking up ketamine for suicidal ideations and postpartum psychosis symptoms. Then, later that evening, literally within minutes of each other, she searched for 2 completely different depression medications, Lamictal at 7:49 p.m. and Elavil at 7:55 p.m.
Section 2. Motion to drop charges. The hinge of the trial. Right after the digital evidence wrapped up, the Commonwealth officially rested its case. And immediately, the defense made a major, calculated move. Attorney Reddington filed a motion asking the judge to drop the charges entirely or at least reduce them to second-degree murder. His argument? He stated it was, quote, overwhelming that this young woman was clearly and unequivocally suffering from a mental disease or defect, meaning she lacked criminal responsibility. So what does this mean? Will the charges actually be dropped? Well, building up the suspense for a moment, the judge denied the motion. He sided with the prosecution, clarifying a key point in Massachusetts law. Basically, a ruling on lacking criminal responsibility can only happen after all evidence is presented by both sides, not just after the prosecution rests.
Section 3. A coworker's perspective. The defense begins.
So, with that denial, the defense officially begins their case. And we see an immediate, massive shift in tone. We go from cold, hard data to deeply human perspectives. They called Margaret Hamp, a fellow labor and delivery nurse. She described Lindsay as an incredibly dedicated, compassionate nurse. But she also highlighted this intense anxiety and devotion Lindsay had regarding her kids prior to her decline. Hamp noted Lindsay would constantly check her kids' baby monitors on her phone while working. Once, when her 6-month-old baby was crying and her husband didn't answer his phone in the middle of the night, Lindsay's anxiety spiked so high she actually called the police to do a wellness check on her family. Now, during cross-examination of this nurse, a really dark and fascinating piece of context came up, the Andrea Yates case. Just as a quick refresher, this was a landmark 2001 case where a Texas mother drowned her 5 children while suffering from severe postpartum psychosis and schizophrenia. She was ultimately found not guilty by reason of insanity. And why was this brought up? Well, years ago, a young Lindsay Clancy was talking with her coworker about a patient struggling with mental health. When her coworker explained the Yates case to her, Lindsay started crying. Her response? She asked, how could a mother hurt her children? It's just a devastatingly tragic quote when you look at the stark reality of why everyone is sitting in that courtroom today. Section 4. Family details the decline. The sister and mother testify. Let's move on and see how this builds, because the defense then brought in the people who knew Lindsay best. First up was her sister, Allison, who laid out a heavy chronological timeline of Lindsay's mental deterioration. Around Thanksgiving of 2022, Allison noticed Lindsay's mood was just off. She lacked energy. By December, she was actively decompensating, battling insomnia, feeling totally hopeless. And then by January, just weeks before the tragedy, Allison said Lindsay looked completely exhausted, basically just going through the motions at a child's birthday party.
Before we get to the mother's testimony, there's a pretty surprising fact worth mentioning about the outside interest in this case. A GoFundMe set up to help Lindsay's parents, the Musgroves, with their mounting expenses has actually surged to nearly $900,000 out of a $2 million goal. It really shows the massive scale of public attention and external support directed at her family right now.
Then, Lindsay's mother, Paula Musgrove, took the stand. She detailed her daughter's intense, growing paranoia. It actually got so severe that Lindsay completely stopped driving her kids to school. Why? Because she was absolutely terrified the teachers and other parents would look at her, know she was sick, and judge her mental state. Paula testified that Lindsay felt her medication was actively destroying her mind, saying she couldn't remember anything and felt totally disconnected from herself.
And then came a truly devastating revelation, something that hadn't been heard publicly before. In December of 2022, while sitting in the kitchen looking visibly nervous, Lindsay made a confession to her mother and her husband. She said, "I just have to tell you guys something. I had thoughts of harming the children. It's a stark, undeniable warning sign, and the defense is relying heavily on this to prove her severely altered state of mind."
Of course, the prosecution pushed back hard on this narrative during cross-examination. They presented a completely different picture to the jury. While the defense highlighted severe decompensation and constant fear, the prosecution pulled up dozens of text messages between Lindsay and her mother, implying things were actually getting better. They even showed a photo taken by one of the kids during that exact same time period of Lindsay and her mother smiling together on the couch. They're using this to point to moments of apparent normalcy. Section 5. The medical expert. Assessing the aftermath. To assess the aftermath of the tragedy, the defense brought in Dr. Michael Volkovich, an impartial ER doctor, to review the medical records. So the crucial point here is understanding the absolute severity of Lindsay's suicide attempt. Dr. Volkovich testified that when she arrived at the hospital, she was completely non-responsive and nearing hypothermia. She had severe, deep lacerations to her neck and wrists and had hemorrhaged so much blood that she required a massive transfusion just to stabilize. He stated with medical certainty that these extreme injuries were fully consistent with severe self-injurious behavior. Essentially, this dispels any argument that the suicide attempt was staged or faked. As Day 14 wraps up, we are left looking at an incredibly complex puzzle. The prosecution has rested, but the defense still has potentially 50 more witnesses on their list. So the huge question hanging over everything is, will Lindsay Clancy actually take the stand herself? And as the jury tries to balance this cold, hard digital tracking data against a deeply tragic medical and family history, how on earth will they untangle the profound complexities of this case? Thanks for tuning into this explainer. We'll see you next time.